Hi everybody. So we're back again today to finish this album, which is Nature Lover by Prima. I'm just going to make a apology at the beginning. So where I live, we have a forest fire burning quite closely. So we have the odd helicopter that flies over. So I'm hoping you guys won't hear them if it starts. But I'm just going to make that blanket apology right now. We are safe. We are fine. The fire is burning away from where I live, which is a good thing. But you just might hear some noises that I have no control over. So with that done, let's get on with this project because last week, and if you're wanting to see a walkthrough of this, there is a walkthrough on my YouTube channel, All Things Paper by Bonnie, or you can find it, if you just search in Scrapbookers, you'll find it there. So, hi Tammy, hi Julianne. So let's get started. So when we finished last week, lay that in there. When we finished last week, hi Debbie, we had did the cover. We had put in our 3 pages, attached them to the hinge. We had worked on the inside front cover, which is a flap to the right and left. We did the waterfall, but we didn't put it down because, hi Tina, because we had not matted the inside front cover. So I matted my inside front cover. I like to use tape when I put down my waterfall. You could use the art glitter glue. I'm sure it will work just as well. I just have not tried the art glitter glue on this part of it, so I go back to my dry adhesive. And you're going to center it at top to bottom, side to side. So I'm just going to close this up. And then we're just going to go to the back cover. And we did flaps. So there was a flap that went up, this flap that goes down, and we had to put the pattern paper on it before we could put the little pocket on it. And then another flap that goes down and a flap that goes up. And then these 2 pockets. And we're going to put a pocket on the inside of the back cover. Now, the pocket on the inside of the back cover is the bigger pocket. And I'm just going to give you some measurements quickly. So it measures 2.5 by just shy of 7. And the reason I did that is you want to make sure that when you put the pocket down, well, I don't really know why I did that now that I'm looking at it. So let's just do straight 7. And it's going to sit just up from the bottom on the inside here. And of course, you're going to do your mitering and etc. And it's going to go like so. So let's put that in. So get out my scissors. And we scored, like I say, 1/2 inch both ends and then 1/2 inch on the long side. So we're just going to do some mitering. I like to cut through my X. At least that's how I do my pockets. And when I say cut through the X, I cut through where this line, the 2 1/2 inch score lines, intersect without cutting a hole in the bottom of my pocket. And then it just looks like so. And then I always like to just miter the top of the side 1/2 inch tabs, like so. Put this one up here so I don't lose it. And we'll give it another good little burnish. You know what? They weren't flying at all morning, the helicopters or the planes. And it has just started up again in the last less than 5 minutes. So I hope you can't hear that. So we're going to put some adhesive along the bottom on that bottom 1/2 inch tab. And we're just going to, I just want it up from the bottom, maybe 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, and then centering it side to side, whatever, keeping in mind that this booklet needs to fit inside this pocket. Hi, Alice. So glad you guys could join me today. So we're going to give this a good burnish. And then, of course, I'm going to take some of my cello tape. This is just so that my book that I'm going to be putting inside this pocket doesn't catch on it. And I like to give this a good burnish, excuse me. And then we're going to put glue on the sides. And then glue on the other 1/2 inch tab on the other side. And then we're just going to flip them up, making sure that it's not getting caught on anything, which it seems like it is right now. And then get my diaper wipe. Happy Friday. Yes, Brenda. Mind you, I'm retired, so just about every day feels like Friday for me. Sometimes I have to catch myself and go, you have stuff you need to do. Okay, and then the book's going to fit in the pocket, like so. And remember, we did cut our book down to 6 1/4. And the page is also 6 1/4. And there are measurements. There is a cutting guide that I had added to the description last week. I don't know if I can add it to this one. I think I had added it to the notes where I said I was going live. I'll get it someplace that you guys can find it. All right, so now they close up and they close up, they close up and they close up. And then our second pocket, which is the one that measures, and we went through all these measurements, except I think I cut this one down a little bit after I got going. This one measures 2 by 6 1/2. And what we did is we scored at 1/2 an inch on both ends. And then we turned it to the 2 inch side and scored it at 1/2 an inch again. So we're just going to cut through that X again. Stay in the shot so you guys can see. I'm sure lots of you have your own way of doing this. This is just what works for me. This is not how I used to cut my corners on my pockets. I used to be so precise, mitering. Not anymore. Got me very brave in my old age. Okay, so again, what we want to keep in mind is this pocket is going to hold hello Peggy, these 2 photomats, and it's the photomats that are actually keeping this whole mechanism closed. So again, we're going to first put the adhesive on the 1/2 inch tab that is on the 2 inch side. And this is what we're going to center. And I tend to like to use a pattern when I'm going to be doing something like this, floating in the air as I call it. A pattern that I can sort of see a line, like I might use a check pattern. So I have a guide. So it's just not all left to my eyesight. So again, I'm getting a little bit of tape. I'm going to put that on the 1/2 inch tab, like so. Give it a good burnish. And now we're going to add adhesive to these 1/2 inch side tabs. And this one over here. Just fold them in, fold it up, and give it a little burnish. Now, this paper I'm using on this particular album is not the Nature's Fair. It's just another paper that I've had in my stash for a while and thought, well, let's use it on my duplicate. Because I always make two projects. I make the one that I use to create my album for my tutorial, and then I use a second one to cover the album that I make during my live. All right, so now we're going to move back to the front of the album, to the front of page 1, because that's how I describe my pages. So this is page 1 front. And like I say, you will find these instructions. I believe it's in last week. I can't remember if I believe they're a PDF that you see, and then in the description, you'll see a picture of the front of the album. So we want to talk about page 1 front. So we're going to bring the album back in here just for a second so I can show you. So page 1 front consists of these 4 flaps. So you've got 2 that go on the left and right hand side of the page, and then you've got 1 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So there's what we're doing. Oh, and before I forget, again, there's a little hiding spot. So you lift this whole mechanism up, and then you have a pocket with a little book in it, like so. And I think we're going to add a little something here. So let's get our pieces out. And I've got my pieces cut. Set the book aside and I'll give you some measurements. Hi, Jerry. So for page 1 front, we need a flap that measures 6, and I cut it about a 1/16 less than 6 because my pages are 6, and I don't want this flap hanging over my page. And I don't want it impeding over here with my turning of the page. So this measures 6, 5, 8, and we scored it 1/2 on the 8-inch side. Hi, Jen. So glad you could join us today. So that's the one piece you're going to need. And then you need 2 that measure. No, that's not the 2 I wanted. These are the 2 I wanted. That measure 3.5 by 5, and on the 5-inch side, you are going to score them both at 1/2. So that's the second thing you need. Let me see, I have something sticking in there. And then the next 2 flaps you're going to need, so they measure 4.25 by 5.5, and you're going to score each of them at 1/2. And I also labeled these pieces as the big flap is A. These 2 smaller flaps are the B flaps. And the little bit bigger flaps are the C flaps. That's going to make it easier for you guys. All right, so we're going to leave this aside for a second because that's going on the inside of this page. So we're just going to work with this to start with. So fold on those score lines, burnish them. And because this is going side to side, I want to miter it. Those half-inch tab, like so. And then give it another burnish. And then let's miter the 2 C's. then let's burnish the two B's. There we go. All right, so let's attach these all to our A piece. And what I did is the B flaps, I brought them in about 1/2 inch, give or take. And we're going to do some rounding of some corners before we get too carried away with ourselves too. So we're going to round all of my corner rounder is not cooperating. So hopefully it will stop. And let's do the C ones at the same time. Now, the only one I'm not going to round right now is this flap that we're going to put in to our album on the front of page 1. So let me get this turned around. Let me get that white piece of paper that I always like to have behind my work. Now, we are going to make sure that it fits. So what I'm looking for right now is that my page is not hanging over the bottom of the book, because remember, I have the book turned upside down right now. And I want to make sure that I put this flap all the way to, let me get the book turned in the right direction. I want to have this flap all the way to the right-hand side of the page. Oh yes, Donna, this is the second part of a project that I started, or Donna, this is the second part of a project I started last week. And we decided I would finish it today. You know what, Jan? As my eyes have gotten older, this white piece of paper is a very good thing in my world. Because the other thing I find is I have a really hard time sometimes, you know, like a dark navy blue. I have a hard time deciding if my socks are dark navy blue or black. This getting old is not for the faint of heart, in my opinion. So I'm lining everything up, making sure I'm not overhanging the bottom of the page or the side of the page. And when I'm happy, I'm going to give this a good burnish. Now, I also have put 2 little circles, which you may not see, with little lines through them. That's to remind me that I'm going to be putting 2 small magnets in each corner, but I'm going to wait to do that. I won't forget. I'm just going to wait to do it for just a second. All right, so now let's get our B flaps and our C flaps back in the picture. So again, when I started, I said about, I don't know, 1/4 inch, give or take, something like that probably. And I don't need to miter my 1/2 inch tab because it's not going right to the side of the page. Like so. Oh, maybe a little further over. So about 1/4 inch is what I'm doing, give or take. And you can put your flap wherever you really want to put your flap. That's the joys of constructing your own album. You can do it any way you want to do it. Now, the only thing we want to make sure is when we attach this bottom flap, we're going to be putting a magnet to hold these 2 flaps in position, because that's what keeps everything closed on this page. So again, add your adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. And then again, I'm going in about 1/4 of an inch. Move my work up so you can see. And I just want to make sure it's not hanging over the bottom, like so. And a good burnish. All right, so that's the 2 that are going top and bottom. And now the 2 that are going side to side, I offset these also. So I have one sitting about somewhere like that. And then the other one is going to sit something like that. So probably about 1 inch from the top on the left-hand side and 1 inch from the bottom on the right-hand side. Hi, RJ. How are you today? I'm great. It's a little warm here. Not as warm as it has been, which is kind of nice. We've had some really high temperatures. And it's been warm. So I adhered this about 1 inch from the top on the left-hand side, and I've lost my white already. Good thing I have another one. It'll show up. So, and then we want to attach this one about 1 inch from the bottom on the right-hand side. So we're just off-centering our flaps. Add adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. Something like this. Looking at what I did on the left-hand side, since I like matchy-matchy. And burnish. And then we have what we wanted. Now I'm going to round my corners. And I could have done this before I put the pockets on, or the flaps on, but I didn't. I just don't like to round my corners before I have the flap adhered to the base page, because I use the corners to help me line everything up. So Donis, you're not sure about, you're not going to be able to do any scrapping this week? And is that what I'm reading there? Or you were answering RJ, or? So we need a large magnet for this purpose. And what I want to be careful about is when I adhere my magnets, I want to keep in mind that I'm going to be putting pattern paper on the front of these flaps. And I want to make sure that my magnet is in far enough that there's going to be enough room for the pattern paper to lay down nicely. Oh, okay. Well, I hope your phone call is not anything serious. So we're going to just try this spot, see what it's going to do. Yeah, I'm going to be happy with that. So I probably went about a thumb's width. I often use my thumb as a measuring tool. I'm just going to pull off that one for a second. Just want to put down some adhesive. So I'm just using a little piece of dry adhesive to hold my magnet in place. I've never had one shift on me, but you never know. And that's what I learned to do when I first started scrapbooking. So some things are hard for me to change. And that'll be fine too. Some more adhesive. Like so. And then close. All right, so now let's open this flap. Now I'm thinking, because twice now I have forgotten that I have this little hiding spot, I think we're going to make a little teeny tiny little tab come out from the bottom of this page. So I'm going to put a little teeny tiny piece of seam binding here at the bottom. And it's kind of going to be that reminder, oh, right, there's something else hiding underneath this. So we're going to turn everything around. The whole book we're going to get turned around. And hopefully I can, hi, Sandy. I'm going to lose, I won't see any of your comments for a few minutes because I got to lean the book up like so, and hopefully my head didn't get in that shot. So I am going to just take some dry adhesive, and I'm laying it on my little, I don't know, it's maybe 1.5 inches. Probably it's way too much now that I'm looking at it. Just taking off the adhesive. I'm going to fold it over, and I just created a little ribbon tab. Now the thing I want to remember is I don't want this sticking out any more than 1/4 inch. And the reason I don't want it sticking out any more than 1/4 inch is so when the book is closed, I don't want this little seam binding pull tab to be longer than my page. So that's why I'm talking about that, no more than 1/4 inch. All right, so I'm going to use dry adhesive for this too, just because it'll go a little faster. You could use the art glitter glue, but I'm not. So I'm going to do this. And I am actually going to use my scoreboard as my little bit of a measure. So what I'm doing is I'm checking my 1/4 inch here on my scoreboard. So there's the 1/4 inch. And I'm just going to use that to guide me. I'm kind of centering it in the middle. Hopefully I'm going to like that position. And then we're going to turn it around. And I'm just going to double check. See, this isn't going to stick out below the bottom of the book, so that's a good thing. I am going to put my piece of backing from my dry adhesive back on it so it doesn't stick to the inside. So yeah, yes, there is going to be a hop that Sandy posted this morning. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. All right. So now what we want to talk about, and Sandy will make sure we all get the details we need so we know when it's happening, what's happening, and how it's going to go forward. So we're going to lift up our flap, and then we're going to work on the base page. And this base page does have a pocket. And the pocket, let's move the book again. The pocket measures 3.5 by 7 less a 1/16. And again, that's so it doesn't hang over the base page. So on the 3.5 inch side, you are going to score at 1/2. You are going to turn to the 7 inch side, score at 1/2, turn it again, and score at 1/2 on both ends. So let's burnish those score lines. And you guys are pros at making pockets, so I know you know exactly what you're doing here. We're going to get rid of my corner rounder, cut through the X, or however you miter the bottom of your pockets. I'm just going to miter the top of that 1/2 inch tab on both sides. And burnish on those score lines. Like so. Bring our book back in. Lift our flap. And again, let's do a little dry fit. And we want to make sure that our pocket is as far to the right as possible, because when we turn our page, we don't want any of this to impede the turning of the page. So let's get our adhesive. We're going to start on the long 1/2 inch tab first. And position white piece of paper. And making sure we're not hanging over the bottom of the page. And burnish. Again, a little bit of tape. And of course, the tape is optional. Some people use a bit of packing tape. I just find it easier using just good old cello tape because it's in that little roller on my desk, and yeah, that's what works for me. So we're putting adhesive on the 1/2 inch tabs on either side of the pocket. Fold them in, fold them up, making sure it's not overhanging the right-hand side of the base page. And burnish. Now this is where I'm going to use 2 little magnets, or a set of 2 little magnets, I guess is how I want to say that. I could have used a big one, but the reason I went with the small ones, just got to get them out. I always have trouble with these little magnets. The reason I use the little magnets is I don't like to have, bear with me while I get the magnet out of its protective casing. Every time I use these magnets, I think they must be a huge theft item the way that they're packaged. And there's 1. And there's 2. So let's put those aside. Oh, let's get these going. All right, what's going on here? Ah, I see what happened. My magnets didn't attract to the right ones. Okay, that's going to work. All right, so the reason I wanted to use a set of small magnets is I'm putting 1 on either side, and I want this flap to lay flat. And that's partly why I kept missing it on my other album, why I've put this little piece of seam binding here, is because it was laying so flat, I kind of forgot that I had given myself this little hiding spot. All right, so we put the pocket on. Now we're going to put our magnets on. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the 1/2 of the magnet, or the magnets, on the pocket side first, because I want them, no, we're putting them down at the bottom. And the reason we're putting them at the bottom is I want them to securely hold this flap down. Sorry, I can't see your comments right now because I have the flap lifted up, but I will look as soon as we get these on. So it is a little overkill to have a magnet in each corner, but That's just what I wanted for this album. If you just want to use a big magnet in the middle, go for it. That's totally your preference. You could not use a magnet at all, and you could use a little bit of seam binding. And then you could tie it this way. So you could tie it from the right side to the left side, something like this one over here. And that would hold this flap in place too. Now, here is where I have a little problem because for some reason I have the wrong, who knows? Let's see if I can get the right side of a magnet here. There we go. So we're going to lift the backing and then lift the backing on this side. And then I'm going to pull this down or bring the flap back down, making sure it's in the right orientation, right where I want it. And then slide, and there's our magnets on the flap itself. And again, we're going to use some tape. And tape. And there's the flap and the pocket. And now we're going to create the booklet that's going to go in this pocket. So our booklet is made up of two pieces. The first piece is a piece of cardstock that measures 6 1/4 by 8 1/2, and I scored at 4 1/4. I'm going to burnish that score line. And then for my page in my booklet, I have a piece that measures 4 3/4 less a 16th, and I'll explain that in a second, by 6 1/4. And on the 4 3/4 inch side, you are scoring at 1/2. So burnish that score line and bring the first part of the booklet in. Now, the reason I made this page or this flap that 1/16 of an inch smaller is I want to make sure when I close my little booklet that I don't have anything stopping it from closing. So it's just back slightly from the score line. So what I do is I actually line it up with the edge of the booklet, and I'm going to use my scoreboard as my tool to help me with that. So I'm just going to make sure I'm happy, and I am. We are going to add, we got to miter these first. Just miter them slightly so they're not hanging over. Put that tool away. So let's get this all lined up again. Like so. And then just lift it up. Add the adhesive. I have to clean the top of my bottle there just in a second. It's really hot here, so I find when it's hot, my art glitter glue kind of clumps to the top of the metal piece. So every once in a while, I have to kind of remove it. So let's give this a good burnish. So, and then I did round these corners. So because my wonderful crocodile is causing me grief these days, I'm going to round them separately. And the back page. Bring the book back in. And it will go in our pocket like so. And that's the front of page 1 finished. So let's turn to the back of page 1 and we'll get our pieces out that we're going to need. So for the back of page 1, what we are creating is we are creating this flap that opens to the left. And then it has a belly band on the front of it for 2 photo mats. So, and then it has a little booklet. It's a flap that lifts up. I have to fix that. Or just do this and then both sides of it are lifting up. So let's set the book aside so we know what we're doing. I'll get you some measurements. Whoops, have them right here. So that flap that is going on the left-hand side, it measures 5.5. You know what, RJ? Thanks, Sandy. So glad you like it. This is 5.5 by 6.25, and on the 6.25, I scored at 1/2. Oh, meaning these. Yes, well, that's the problem. I can't order from Joann's. You can order some things from Joann's and they'll ship to Canada right now. Other things they can't. I discovered that yesterday. So let's burnish that 1/2-inch score line. And do that first. And then our second piece is the belly band, and it measures 4 by 6.5. And we're scoring at 1/2 on both ends. And then the little flap, that little flap on the top of the belly band, it is a piece of cardstock that measures 3.25 by 8.5, and we are scoring at 4.25. So burnish that. And let's go back and burnish the belly band tabs too at the same time. And now in our 2 mats that are going to go under the belly band, they measure 5.5. You know what? I got my fingers crossed. It's much too long a conversation to go into on my live about the border. But I have my fingers crossed that I'm going to get to travel soon. So let's bring the book back in. So we're going to start with that first flap. The flap was 5.5 by 6.25. It is going down. I kept it just up from the bottom of the page, about 1/4 inch. So let's put our adhesive on our 1/2-inch tab. And like I said, I kept it up about 1/4 inch from the bottom of the page. I used a little too much glue. That's okay. We'll get that cleaned up here. And I need my burnishing tool again. So give it a really good burnish. And I'm going to round my corners. There's that done. And now the belly band is going to be centered right in the middle of this flap. So I'm centering it top to bottom. Well, not centering top to bottom because it goes top to bottom. What I'm centering is left to right. And we want to make sure we're not hanging over. So let's put this white paper in here again. We don't need to miter these tabs. Something like that, I think, is going to keep me happy. That's okay, Jan. This will stay recorded, so you can come back and watch it anytime. But thank you for joining us, and have an awesome weekend. So there's one side of our belly band down. And then we want to go to the top. Add some adhesive. And there we go. And then let's just dry fit our photo mats, making sure we don't have any glue that's going to get on them. Let's use this one. Just making sure that everything was open. Hello, Leila. Oh, hello. I may not be saying your name right, and I apologize for that. All the way from Sweden. Glad that you could join us. It's evening over there, isn't it? I think you're like 9 hours ahead of where I am, because I'm on Pacific time. So let's round our photo mats. Again. So, and just slide on in. Now, once you get the pattern paper on them, they're going to be a little tighter when they slide in there, and that's okay. 22:45. Okay, I'm gonna have to do some math here. Somebody will help me what that turns out to in a 12 in our 12-hour clock. I need a piece of seam binding. Hi, Bev. So glad you could join us. So I'm using about 24 inches because I like to make sure I have enough. And I am going to round the corners on my little flap. 10:45. Thank you, Sandy. I actually have an app on my phone that helps me with that. So when I'm traveling, because airports go by that 24-hour clock, so I know where I need to be and when I need to be there. So the next thing I want to remind you is don't adhere this to your belly band yet. You need to decide what your pattern paper is going to be, and then you're going to adhere it. But I am going to wrap my seam binding around it so I don't forget it, because that's what's going to hold this mechanism shut. Okay, so I'm going to get some dry adhesive. And I know I could use the art glitter glue, but I kind of like that I don't have to wait for it to dry. That's my point. Oh, yes, I guess you would. Oh, is the dating different too? So we're just going to center it. Something like this. Doesn't have to be perfect. And if you're wrong, you can just lift it up and try again. And then it just ties. And that's what's going to keep the booklet, this little flat booklet, closed once we adhere it to the page. So there it is. You can cut off a little bit of your excess. Now, I am just going to use some repositionable tape for right now. So I'm centering it top to bottom on the belly band, side to side, and it's going to go like that. And then I believe, turn my page, that yes, I did use a set of magnets to hold this flap down, just so it's not flapping in the wind. You could leave it without a belly band or without a magnet. That's totally your choice. But I just think that it could use a magnet just so it's not going to cause a problem. So I'm just going to take our large magnet. Ah, I see. That makes total sense, Sandy. Friday fire for us? I don't understand. Donis, do you have a fire by your place? Because I know we have lots here in British Columbia right now. It's kind of scary how many there are. So I'm just going to look at what I did. I'm putting this magnet in the middle of my page. And the reason I want to do that, or in the middle of my flap, is because I did paper piecing in my album. And I don't want my magnet to be too close to where I paper pieced. So if I have it in the middle, I know it'll be just fine. And then like so. Like I say, you could choose not to put a magnet here. Oh, well, it is. We can't have fires in our fire pits right now. We have a fire ban because it's so hot and dry here. And there's the back of page 2 finished. So let's move on. Back of page 1 finished. Let's move on to the front of page 2. So the front of page 2 is held together by some seam binding. And then it has a flap that opens to the left, a set of pockets on the right flap, and that flap opens like so. Okay, so let's move this out of our way. I'll give you some measurements. So the flap that is going on the right-hand side, it measures 5 by 7.5, and we scored on the 5-inch side at 1/2. Then we rotate it and scored on the 7.5-inch side at 1/2 on. No, we did not. We just scored at 5 on the. Let's try that one more time. On the 5-inch side, we scored at 1/2. So let's burnish that score line. And I have a little note here, and I'll explain my note in a second. Let's miter, because these are going top to bottom on that base page. Let's put this up here so we don't forget about it. And then we have a set of 2 pockets. And the 2 pockets measure 3.5 by 4 3/4. And on the 3.5-inch side, you are scoring at 1/2. And then we're going to turn to the 4 3/4-inch side, and you're going to score at 1/2 on both ends. So we're going to burnish those score lines. And then we're going to cut our pockets. Just just like we cut all the other pockets that we've done in this album. So I'm going to burnish my score lines first, and then I will worry about mitering these two. Okay, so get our scissors. I am cutting right through where those two lines intersect. Get rid of the bulk in the corners of our pockets at the bottom. And then I'm just slightly mitering the 1/2-inch tabs on either side at the top. Let's do the other one. Game through the X. And the 1/2-inch tab at the top. Those are the pockets taken care of. Let's get rid of our bits. And then we have 4 mats that are going to go into those 2 pockets. And they measure 3.5 by 4. And then this is the flap that is on the left-hand side of that page. It measures 5 by 9. We're scoring at 1/2. And we're scoring at 4 3/4. So let's fold on the score lines and burnish. And I just am checking something here. Yes. And then what we're doing is we've folded over our 1/2-inch score line. And then the 4 3/4 score line, we're folding it back on itself. So this mechanism, so this is the tab that's going to be attached to the base page, and then it opens to the left, and then it opens to the right. So let's give these a good burnish. We don't have to miter these tabs because they're not going from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. We're going to go back and we're going to start on the right-hand side. So we're going to start on the right-hand side of this base page. Lost my white piece of, no, I didn't. Put it away. Never put things away. So you just want to dry fit this and make sure that it's not overhanging the top or the bottom. I'm turning the book so that the right-hand side of the base page is to the bottom of your screen now. Just want to check this and make sure I'm checking to make sure I'm not hanging over. I'm waiting to round my corners until I have it in the book. So we mitered our 1/2-inch tabs, 1/2-inch tab. And because I didn't stick the pin back in my glue, those things happen. All right. Get rid of that glue. So I'm measuring, keeping an eye on making sure I'm not going over the edge of the page, either on the top or the bottom. Not my wipe. Burnish. And I want to round these corners with my 3/8. And now let's do this. Like so. All right. Now my note said pattern paper. So I want to make sure I lay down my pattern paper before I'm going to put down my 2 pockets, because you want your pattern paper to cover the whole, from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. And if I don't put it down now, then I'd have to paper piece it. And I know I wouldn't be as happy if I had to do that. So I made it one complete piece. So I don't have to worry about that. It just looks neater with the pockets on top of it. So let's just get those back in there. Get it out of our way. And bring the pockets back in that we already mitered and burnished. So let's round the one side of our pattern paper with the correct side. And we want to ink it a little bit because, well, I rounded the corners. You guys are all very quiet today. Taking notes or following along. I'm just going to dry fit, and yes, I'm going to be happy with that. So let's get our adhesive on the back of our pattern paper. And you know what? If you forgot to do this beforehand, you can still do it. You just paper piece your pattern paper. So I'm just making sure that I'm happy with that, which I am. And I just want one of my different burnishing tools. I have several and I use them all. I like they just have different jobs. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to turn my book so the edge of my base page is facing me. Let's just stick those back in there. Because what I want to do is I kind of want to dry fit my two pockets. And kind of make sure I'm not going to have any big gap anyplace, and I'm not. Okay, so this is going to work. So again, I'm just going to add adhesive to the bottom of each pocket. So I'm going to make sure that it's not over the edge of my flap. And then I'm going to add the second one. Like so. And like so. And this is where you got a couple seconds here that you can straighten things out if you need to. So what I don't want to have is I don't want to have a gap, a huge gap between my pockets. That's what I'm aiming for anyway. There we go. All right, and a little bit of tape. And more tape. And when we get this done, we're halfway through this part of our construction. And then you guys can just decorate it. And there is a walkthrough of the finished product, or the finished album. Our adhesive to the 1/2-inch tabs on the side. I'm going to start with one side and then I'm going to do the other side. Just going to give it a slight tack down, hopefully. I'm going to get this one because this is where I want to make sure that I'm the other side. Here's what we want it. Now to burnish. like so. And there are your pockets on that flap that is on the right. And now we're going to round the corners on our little photo mats that are going in those pockets. Hello, Diane. Nice that you could join us. And what's Wisconsin like on this fine Friday afternoon? Well, I guess it's almost Friday evening for, I guess it's what, 4 o'clock there, give or take? Because you're Central Time, aren't you, Diane? So there's our 2 photo mats for the one pocket. And now let's do the 2 photo mats for the second pocket. Oh, nice. Beautiful days are nice. And again, yes, I lived in Manitoba for 7 years, so that's why I know Central Time. I've actually lived in 3 different time zones. I lived in the Eastern Standard Time. I lived in Central Time, and now I live in Pacific Time. So there are our flaps in our pocket. And now what we have left to do is we have the flap, that long flap that is going on the left-hand side of the base page. And again, we don't have to miter the 1/2-inch tabs. So I centered that top to bottom, give or take. And first of all, I'm just kind of slightly tack it down because I want to make sure when I turn my page, it's not going to interfere with that. So I've taken it in. It's in just slightly from the edge of the base page. Hi, Janet. And you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to put my seam binding down, but that is okay. It could be worse. We can either add our seam binding to the edge, because really what I want it to do is I want it to put the seam binding on before I put this flap on. So I think I'm going to completely change us and use a magnet, because I also wanted it over on this side. And what I'm a little afraid of is because I'm not putting my seam binding underneath my 2 pockets and underneath this flap, that I could rip some paper in the future. So I think we're going to go with 2 magnets, or a magnet. Sorry about that. I just think we're going to be happier with the project. So in the instructions, it's going to say that you've used some seam binding, but we're going to use the magnet instead. And what we're going to do is we're going to adhere. I'm going to move this over like so. It's going to work better. Yes. Now, the reason I'm moving my magnet over here is then I'm not trying to go through all of these layers. You know what? You could use a clip with the pattern paper. Yes, you certainly could, RJ. So if you remember, put your seam binding on first. If you're doing what I'm doing now, I'm going to resort to a magnet. And this is what lives are all about. You get to see us fix an oops. And it's okay. It's not what I wanted, but you know what? You don't always get what you want. So there's what we're going to have at the end. And I am going to round these corners. Like so. And there you go. There is front of page 2 with a magnet instead of seam binding. So let's go to the back of page 2. And we're not going to forget this time because I'm going to put the seam binding on right now. So our seam binding is going to go on the left and right hand side of our base page. We are going to center it. I'm going to put the tape in just a little bit. So we're centering it top to bottom. I'm leaving it in just a little bit. Okay. It's going to go like so. I'm going to put the tape back onto, with the backing onto the tape again. And then we're going to do the same thing over here. We'd like these two pieces to line up if at all possible. Like so. And we're going to cut this seam binding so we can work around it. And when you put your seam binding on, I do like, sometimes I forget, and sometimes I change my mind about this. I do like to have it on the base page. Sometimes I forget, and in some situations I will add the seam binding on top of something, but I do prefer it to be on the base page. So let's move this out of the way. Let's bring the actual book in so you can see what we're going to be creating. So here is our flap. And what we have is we have 1, 2 on a big flap. So 2 small flaps, and then it turns like this. And I'm probably going to add some adhesive to the wings of my butterflies because I'm seeing that as they're in the book, they're getting sort of, yes, we're going to fix that. My butterfly, for some reason, has ripped. So I'm going to fix that by gluing down my wings. And that sometimes happens. So here are the pieces we need. So this is for the back of page 2. I have a piece that measures 5.5 by 6.5. And on the 5.5 inch side, I'm scoring at 1/2. And then I have 2 smaller flaps that measure 4.5 by 5. And on the 5 inch side, I'm scoring both of them at 1/2. So let's fold and burnish our score lines. So I don't know if you can hear this or not, but the whole time I've been teaching, there are planes flying over, dropping retardant on this fire. And not being able to go and see where things are at, it's making me a little anxious. But I know if it was something serious, my husband would come and say to me, you have to stop because we are on what's called alert right now because of this fire, which means that if it gets worse or starts to head towards town, we need to leave. But because my husband's not coming and saying that to me, I'm going with everything is okay. So the larger flap, we are going to center it top to bottom on the left-hand side of the base page so we can get rid of this little bit of backing. We don't have to miter the 1/2-inch tabs on this flap. So remember, this is that bigger flap. And we're centering it top to bottom, like so. And I did go and check it before I got started today, and there was hardly any smoke. So that's what's kind of surprising me, that we've got the airplanes flying, because we didn't this morning. So you don't want this flap to be over the edge of the base page. Give it a good burnish, and there you have it. And then our 2 flaps that are going to be going on the right-hand side of this flap, hi Bev, they're going to be on top of each other and then centered on the larger flap. So let's round these corners. And this one too. Just move the book out of our way for a second. And then we're going to miter this one. So on the tabs on the smaller flap, just miter 1/2-inch tab. And it's going to go right on top of the first tab. But so here's your fold that's going to go on the right-hand side of the book, the base page, and this one's going to go right on top of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line them up like so. And this time I'm going to use some of my pegs, just because that's easier. And then I'm just going to lift it. And I'm going to add my adhesive to the 1/2-inch tab. Like so. And then I'm going to adhere this like so. So I'll show you what I did here. Just let me get this burnished. So what I did is I adhered one of the smaller flaps to the first smaller flap. Now I'm bringing the book back in, and here's that larger flap we put on the left-hand side of the base page. I'm turning the book, and we are going to center these smaller flaps like so, top to bottom, side to side, but I'm going to round my corners first, just because this is just easier. And I need that white piece of paper. So again, remember I have the book laying on its side. So they're going to go like so. Add the adhesive to the 1/2-inch tab. And we're done this page. We're on to the front of page 3. We're almost done. So we'll be done within our 2 hours, I think. I'm pretty sure. Don't want it hanging over, so just take a wee look. Burnish it well. And then we're going to take our seam binding and tie it shut. Like so. And then we're going to move on to the front of page 3. Book out of our way. Finish project in. So on the front of page 3, another piece of seam binding that's holding it shut. So we're going to put that on first. And it almost mirrors the front of the back of page 2. 2 flaps open this way, and then we have 2 smaller flaps that open this way. So let's get that out of the way. And the measurements for those flaps for the front of page 3 are the 2 flaps that are going on the left-hand side. They measure 4.5. Hi, Vanessa. By 5. And on the 5-inch side, you score at 1/2 on both of those flaps. So we're going to fold on the score lines, burnish on the score lines, and don't let me forget the seam binding, or we'll be using another magnet. Hi, Tomalee. So nice that you could join us. And the flaps that are going on the right-hand side of that base page, there are 2 of them. So the smaller flap measures 3.5 by 7.5 with a 1/2-inch score line on the 3.5-inch side. Second flap measures 4.5 by 7.5. And on the 4.5-inch side, you score at 1/2. So let's hold on those score lines, and we will miter note to self, put instructions on your base page saying seam binding for future reference. We want to miter these. And let's get the lid and the pin and the glue so when I do need it, it's going to work. Miter. And miter. Okay, bring the book back in. Bring a piece of seam binding back in. So for those that you just joined me, I made an oops and I forgot to put down my seam binding, and it meant I had to use a magnet instead. So I'm trying to remember. Okay, Jerry. Thanks, Jerry. That means a lot. I'm glad you enjoy the tutorials because I enjoy making them for you. And I enjoy doing the live because I get to interact with you guys, and that's part of it too, I think. At least for me it is. And I think you need to see that we do make oopses, and it's okay because we'll figure a way to fix our oopses when we make them. And if it's really serious enough, you can always rip out the paper because this is artisan. It is amazing. I'm always amazed at how much the artisan cardstock can take. And what I mean by that is when you make a mistake and you have to tear it out, how you don't usually wreck the whole project. So we are going to cut this one too, because then it's out of our way. So usually all I do is I just kind of lift it up, kind of cut it wherever it happens to cut, as long as it's someplace in the middle. So there it is open. So we're going to start with the smaller flaps that are going on the left-hand side. Again, we're only going to miter one set of 1/2-inch tabs, because the other one we don't need to miter because, again, it's not going to the top of the page. That's how I always determine if I'm going to miter. It's going side to side, then I will miter, or top to bottom. Well, that could have been a disaster, but it wasn't. That was my water hitting the floor, and I only have a little mess on the floor. So give me 1 second. Again, live action. Thank goodness I have some paper towels. Thank goodness the top didn't come off of it. And it's not a sticky drink, so that's another thing that's thank goodness for. Sorry about that. All right, so we're going to add adhesive to that 1/2 inch tab. And I normally do things like this out of the book because it just, exactly, Tomalee, stuff happens. Actually, very little of it spilt on the floor. It could be worse. All right, and we're going to round these corners before we put it into the album. You guys are always so good about this kind of thing happening. It's just stuff. And I appreciate that. All right, so we're centering this. At least that's what I'm going to do for my book, is I'm centering it top to bottom. So just want to see where the edge is. All right. Yes. So add your adhesive to the back of the 1/2 inch tab. And then we're centering it against top to bottom. And before it really gets stuck down or adhered, I just want to turn my page, make sure it's not interfering, which it's not. So let's just wipe out any glue. Give it a good burnish. There we go. So there's the 2 smaller tabs on the left-hand side. And then for our 2 larger tabs that are going on the right-hand side, I'm going to adhere them into the book one at a time. But I am first going to just dry fit to make sure top to bottom they're not hanging over the page, and they're not. Do the second one. They're going to be fine. I do want to miter my 1/2 inch tabs. Oh, I already did that. That's good. All right, so let's start with the larger one, or the wider one. So that would be the one that measured 4.5 wide. Add our adhesive. Get in our white piece of paper. Remove the backing. And then, again, making sure, if my head was in the shot, I apologize for that. Like so. Give it a good burnish. And then our second one is going on top of it. And again, doing the same thing. Get a dry fit. And you want to make sure that this is not going to be hanging over the edge of your base page for both of them. First one was fine. Let's just check our second one. That's where I find that piece of white paper does help, because it lets you see exactly where the edge of the page is. Making sure if there's any glue that you're getting that cleaned up. Burnish this one. And then we're going to round our corners on each of those flaps. All right. And then we're going to tie this shut. And then we will be moving on to the back of page 3. And that is the last page in this book. So I'm going to move it to the side, bring in our finished project. Again, we're using seam binding, so we're going to just take our piece of seam binding and lay it right on top of the project. And this is a very easy 2 flaps to the left, 1 flap to the right. Okay, and so we'll get the pieces out, give you the measurements. So the back of page 3 consists of 2 flaps that measure 4 3/4 by 6 1/2. And on the 4 3/4 side, you're scoring at 1/2. I am hoping I am going to the Florida retreat next year, Tomalee, that the border is definitely not going to be closed at that point in time. So the answer to your question is yes. And the flap that's then going to be on the right-hand side is 4 1/2 by 7 1/2. And we scored at 1/2 on the 4 1/2 inch side. So burnish those score lines. Remember, we only have to miter the 1/2 inch tabs on the flap on the right-hand side. Put those away. And then let's burnish these flaps. Those 2 smaller ones. We only need to miter the tabs on one of these flaps because they don't go to the top or the bottom of the page. They're centered in the middle, like so. So let's attach these 2 together. So I'm taking my 2 smaller flaps and attach them together. Once I'm happy that they are the same size. Like so. All right, so we're going to add our adhesive to the 1/2 inch tab. Okay. And fold it in. Burnish. And I thought I was being so good. I was moving those clips, and that's what caught my cup of water. It had a lid on it. Just a little slop on the floor. Could be worse. And it's not sugary, so there's the other thing. All right, let's bring the book back in. Get our last flaps in the book. First, we're going to put our seam binding in. So again, we are making sure that our seam binding is centered. So one side of it's going to go on the left-hand side of the book. The other half is going to go on the right-hand side of the book. We are centering it top to bottom, or at least I am. You certainly could do it any way you would like to. And over here. And I'm actually using the seam binding on the other side of this page as what's lining it up. That just a bit. And there we go. So let's put adhesive on the back of our flaps that are going to the left-hand side of the base page. And we want to center top to bottom as best we can. Just going to turn the book because it's just easier for me. I need to lift. Try that one more time. Now I'm going to be happy. No, lift. Need to put more adhesive on the back of it because I had to move it. It just wasn't laying flat. And what the problem is, it's my seam binding. I need to undo these bows because they're kind of warping this page. And that's not going to be helpful when I'm trying to lay down a flap. It's going to be fine after. It's just for right now. It wasn't cooperating. Move it down just a slight bit. And I want to burnish. Like so. And there's the small flaps on the left-hand side. And now we're going to go with the larger flap that's on the right-hand side. Now, when you're putting this flap in, what you've got to remember is you don't want to get in the way of the turning of the base page. I just did a little dry fit and everything was fine. I've already mitered my tabs. So make sure that it's centered side to side or top to bottom. And then, like I said before, I just like to tack it down a little bit, and I like to turn the page, just making sure that everything's going to be okay. And it is. Now we're going to burnish it. We are going to cut our seam binding. You know what, Diane? I didn't have cards on my radar, but you know what? I certainly can do some cards. Maybe we'll do cards the next time I do a live. I'm not doing a live next Friday, so it'd be the Friday after that. Maybe we'll do some cards for that live. There's an idea. I will put cards on my agenda, Diane, and get some more cards made. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying the cards because I enjoy making them. Because I love, love, love looking at all the fancy cards that I see online. But I always go, but how? Did you see what I did? I used one of the seam bindings from the wrong page. But I always go, I don't have that stuff. I can't decorate them like that. And then I just walk on by and go on to something else. So that's why I try to keep the cards simple with stuff that you have on hand. And then if you want to make them, jazz them up, go into your stash. You'll find lots of stuff to jazz them up. Hello, Lynette. Nice that you could join us. We're almost done. We're just going back and tying our seam binding. So there it is. There is our folio with 3 pages with 3/4 of an inch gussets. Opens left, opens right with a waterfall. 4 flaps on the front of page 1. On the back of page 1, there is a little flap that you don't put down until after you got your pattern paper on. Lifts up. It sits on the belly band. Then there are 2 photo mats that slide under that belly band. And then that whole flap, that's no problem, lifts up with a magnet. On the front of page 2, we were supposed to put seam binding, but I forgot. So we used a magnet instead. So you add your first magnet here. So it is on the flap on the right. And then the second magnet goes on the base page right here. So you don't have a lot of thickness going through. Or you can remember to do the seam binding and then you don't have to do that. The back of page 2 is seam binding, closure, 2 flaps to the right, then a flap no, 2 flaps to the right, and then 1 flap to the left. And then on the front of page 3, it is 2 flaps to the left, 2 flaps to the right. So there's lots of real estate in this album, and you can embellish because you've got those 3/4 of an inch gussets. And then on the back of page 3, and I didn't round the corners, so you're going to round these corners, opens to the left and again opens to the right. And then the inside back cover has a pocket. That's what's closing the mechanism closed. You take out your photo mats, lifts up, lifts down, down, up, and a booklet in that pocket. So that is our completed project for the Prima Nature Fair collection that I did. Remember, there is a walkthrough of the project. I see my pine cones that I picked up on my little adventure are having a hard time of it, so I might have to change those out to maybe some Charms pine cones that I have because they're just not standing up. Thought I'd give it a try. It's okay, it's easy to fix. So there's the finished album. There is a walkthrough of this on my YouTube channel, which is All Things Paper by Bonnie. There's also a walkthrough of it in the Scrapbookers of Country Craft Creations. You just kind of have to Google and search for it. So I will see you guys next week. No, 2 weeks from now. I believe it's 2 weeks from now, yes. With another project. And Diane, it just might be cards. I had an idea, but maybe I'll push that one back and do cards instead. Because cards are something we can always use. So again, I hope everybody's having a great day. Thanks, Sandy. Thank you to everybody. And sorry I was a little off as those planes were flying over because it's just a little unnerving. Okay, have a great day, everybody. See you next time. Bye.